Okay, our last talk before lunch. You won't want to miss this one. It's super interesting and timely. Can we please welcome Dr. Philip Abdelmalek, who's the Unit Head of Intelligence, Innovation, and Integration at the World Health Organization Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence. Please welcome Philip to the stage.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to be here, and thank you all. I know that I stand between you and lunch, so I'll try to make this quick. If you've looked at my bio at all, you will have seen that I'm an epidemiologist. What you will not have seen in my bio is that I'm an introverted epidemiologist, and this is a large crowd. So introverted epidemiologist, large crowd, pretty much don't know anybody here almost except my colleagues who came with me. AI conference, a little bit outside of my comfort zone, also sounds like the makings of a bad joke, so we can try to think about that maybe. But what I want to do maybe to help me is to try and get to know you a little bit better. Obviously doing the whole who are you, what organization you're from, and what you do isn't exactly going to work. So I'm just going to ask two quick questions. Are there any other, maybe just with a show of hands, any other epidemiologists here besides my colleagues who came with me? None. All right. I guess that makes me the expert in the room when it comes to epidemiology. That's good. What about if I ask, how many of you would consider that your primary area of expertise or work is in the technology domain? And if you could put your hand up and just keep it raised for a little bit. That's pretty much, yeah, that's a lot. So maybe if everybody just looks around, find people with their hands up. If you have difficult questions for me about tech or AI, ask somebody who has their hand up, please. That would be terrific. Okay, thank you. So, now that I've managed to offload some of my discomfort a little bit, what I really want to do over the next few minutes is to try and actually encourage you to think a little bit outside of your comfort zone. When it comes to pandemics, and especially if we're talking about revolutionizing digital disease detection or disease detection, a revolution requires change. It requires a shift in the paradigm. It requires us to change something, and often to do that, we have to get outside of our comfort zone. And when it comes to pandemics, what I want us all to realize is that pandemics are not WHO's problem. Pandemics are about our health. They're about my kids' health, they're about my health, they're about your health. Pandemics are our problem. And so if we're going to address pandemics, we're going to have to listen to each other, we're going to have to learn from each other, and we're going to have to work together. Pandemics have been around for as long as we know. And these tiny little things, these microscopic things that affect us, bacteria, viruses, parasites, they don't discriminate. They don't care what race you are, what gender, where you're from, where you live, what time in history we're in. And you only need to look to the last 3.5 years to see the drastic impact that they can have. You saw some significant numbers already up on the screen through history, and a lot of deaths. But deaths aren't the only consequence of outbreaks, epidemics, and pandemics. There's significant economic impact, and a lot of things that aren't captured here. The impact on displaced populations, on poverty, on kids not going to school, and what are the long-term implications of that? On adults not continuing their education. Economic shutdowns, businesses closed down. Let's not even talk about the mental health, or we should talk about them, but I'm not going to here. The mental health consequences and the long-term consequences of COVID-19, the last 3.5 years. So you don't need to look very far at all. And that's something that I'm sure has impacted everybody sitting in this room, some probably more profoundly than others. And that is our reality. All of us. But it's not just outbreaks that we worry about at the World Health Organization, or that national, regional, and international organizations and national public health institutes worry about. We worry about a much more complex ecosystem because we live in a complex ecosystem. A lot of interrelated factors. And this slide goes out of date very quickly. And we all know about natural disasters and conflicts that are happening right now around the world, and that pop up very quickly and very suddenly. So when we're talking about how we can use AI to address these issues, we need to be thinking more broadly. We need to have a bigger perspective, a bigger lens, and we need to change the way in which we think about and do public health, because it's all connected and it all impacts me and you. At WHO, and this is just to give you a little example, a little snippet, on a monthly basis across WHO, roughly 35 new events are identified and reported and investigated. This is on a monthly basis. Now, 35 new events may or may not seem like a whole lot to you, but it takes quite a lot of effort and a lot of people around WHO, which, as you can see on the map, there's headquarters, there are headquarter outposted offices, we've got 6 regional offices, and we've got over 140 country offices. And it takes teams of people to sift through the information to bring it down to 35 new events on average per month. And if you go up this inverted pyramid, you quickly see that you would need an army of people to sift through 9 million pieces of information on a monthly basis, and we don't have that army of people. So we have to rely on technology. And 9 million pieces of information, really, in the grand scheme of things, is a drop in the bucket, right? It's not really big data at all. It's 9 million pieces of information per month. So over the next 3 slides, I want to talk, actually, a little bit more than 3 slides. I want to talk about 3 initiatives. And what I want to highlight through this is not really what we have at WHO, because a lot of this we don't, but it's what we want to work towards and where we see AI and the kinds of skills that many of you can bring to the table can have in terms of an impact on preventing pandemics. So I'm going to start with an initiative that we do currently have called the Epidemic Intelligence from Open Sources Initiative. And as the animation runs in the background, I'm not going to narrate what's happening, but I'll give you a little bit of a history of EIOS, as we tenderly call it. EIOS is an initiative that WHO took leadership of at the end of 2017. And what it is it's an open source intelligence initiative. And I use the word initiative because it's not just about technology. One of the key components of the initiative is the community of practice itself. These are experts around the world that are using the system that is part of the EIOS initiative to detect potential health threats from publicly available information. To do this and to build this system, we've worked closely through partnerships with particularly the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, but also many other collaborators, universities and private sector, to build various components that help us sift through information on a daily basis. In some cases, information is coming in every few minutes, analyzed, and then made available to analysts around the world in this community of practice, who then sift through it, filter it using built-in filters they can define, and it is part of their workflow to identify potential threats. And then they act on that. And there are various tools within the system to help them as part of that workflow. It's not a publicly available system because it's not designed for that. It is designed to be a part of that workflow for those public health experts. And over the last 5.5, 6 years since we started this initiative, it has grown significantly. The system has evolved not quite as quickly. And this is where we need to be thinking about how AI and technology can help us accelerate the developments. With all of this information coming in, we need to be adding contextual information. We need to be connecting the dots. We need to be using AI to synthesize, analyze, interpret, help us to do that. Not to replace the analysts, but with so much information and the consequences of these events being so grave, we need to act quickly. We need to find them quickly, and we need to assess and respond quickly. But what if we could do one better? What if we could, instead of detecting them, better predict them and prevent them altogether. And so another initiative that we've just started to embark on is a decision support simulator. And we're just in the blueprinting phase. So what you're seeing up here really is just sort of, kind of like an artist's rendition of what it could look like. And it doesn't even capture the whole scope of where we want to head. But imagine if we had a system that would allow us to ask in natural language and to get back responses that help us identify what ifs. What if we were to vaccinate everybody? Would that be the most effective and efficient thing? And what if we were to do that and close schools? And not only what would the impact of that be on numbers of deaths, numbers affected, but what would that impact be on the economy, on society? Because as I said earlier, there are other consequences. It's not just about lives lost, it's about livelihoods affected as well. So saving lives is not just about cases and deaths. It's about so much more than that. So this is another initiative that we are pursuing. And finally, the third one that I just want to mention, this is, many of you over the last 3.5 years will have seen many dashboards coming out of a lot of different organizations covering cases, deaths, eventually hospitalizations, maybe vaccinated individuals' numbers. And often in public health and epidemiology, we use epicurves to try and understand how an outbreak is evolving and how it may have started and what kind of outbreak to get a few different characteristics about the outbreak and the trends. And a lot of times, this is how we report it. Numbers of cases or deaths over time, possibly stratified or by geographic location. But in reality, this is not how an outbreak looks. In reality, an outbreak looks more like this. There are a lot of independent or dependent factors that interact. And understanding this is where we need to head. But how do we do that? What you're seeing here, which is taken from a paper, and the references down at the bottom there, what you're seeing here is a representation of some of what we know about how certain things link together, how they're related. How do we take this representation, combine the representation of what I know with the representation of what you know, put all of that together into something that a system can use to then help us identify patterns and effectively reason and get to better conclusions, better understanding of what's happening and why it might be happening and what things are connected. And so this is the third thing that we are trying to explore. And many of you will be way ahead of me here and sort of looking at this and going, he's talking about a field of AI called knowledge representation and reasoning, and you're right, that is exactly what I'm talking about. And so really what we are trying to explore is there a mechanism, or how do we link information around the world to represent this knowledge? So it's not just a data model, and one of my colleagues who's sitting here will be happy that I think that I pointed that out. But it is really, how do we represent that knowledge and use it to reason in order to make better decisions, creating this semantic network of data around the world. In conclusion, I want to just talk about 3 things quickly. The first one is, I want to say that you will have heard throughout this conference or this summit talks about responsible AI. And I'm not going to go into another talk about responsible AI, but I just want to point out that that is something that has to be taken seriously and that we have to incorporate into our thinking, into our development, into our access and use of these systems by design, not as an afterthought. And that includes, particularly for us at the World Health Organization, how we think about and incorporate the contributions and the use of these systems from low and middle income countries. We have to be thinking about vulnerable and fragile populations and how are they a part of what we are doing. The second thing I want to just briefly mention is that I think it was yesterday morning Fernando was talking about we have to get comfortable living in a world with shades of gray. And for those of you who were here that morning, let me know if I got that wrong, but that's how I remember it. But as I was thinking about that, I realized that my immediate question was, what shade of gray? And I realized that, well, the shade of gray depends to a large extent on who I'm talking to or what I'm looking at, because it's indirectly related to how much I trust whoever it is who's telling me or whatever system is telling me. My shades of gray with my wife are significantly more varied than my shades of gray with any one of you, because I don't know you. So I might be less comfortable with shades of gray with you. And so trust is something that is essential, and I think we've heard that in this summit as well, and something that at WHO we're trying to think about. How do we build that trust? Because if we're going to learn from each other and work together, we also have to trust each other. And we have to trust in what we're producing together, or at least be able to quantify that. And finally, the third thing I just want to say is I just want to bring it full circle back to how I started. If you read my biography, you will know that I have two young, mostly adorable children, Sarah, who's 8, and Jessie, who's turning 6 this month. And one of the things that keeps me up at night, well, work, I'll be honest, it's work that keeps me up at night, but one of the things that my wife and I sometimes worry about with our kids as we look around, as you think about some of the slides that I showed earlier with conflict and disease, is just the kind of world that they're growing up in. And what will their future look like? And as we think about some of these things, and then we think about AI and the technology, I think too when I was a kid, and the idea for me of AI and wafer-thin touch screens or computers in the palm of your hand, all of these things, or even video calling, these were all things of books and movies. And look at us now. Here we are at an AI conference by the hundreds, maybe even thousands, talking about opportunities and solutions and witnessing a transformation. And so when it comes to these things, I have hope, not because of the technology, but because I see massive opportunity, I see massive potential, and I see massive capacity sitting right here in front of me in each one of you. And so this, again, is our invitation for you to join us. If we're going to revolutionize disease detection, if we're going to prevent pandemic, it's not going to take WHO, it's going to take all of us. So join us in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abdelmalek. That was super interesting, and it's such an important message because we hear a lot about how AI is going to kill us all, or it's a systemic risk to humanity, but actually it's going to be saving lives. So that's such a good message to take away to lunch. We have 2 minutes for questions. Is there anyone else who wants, this lady right here in the red, right up here at the front?
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you for a nice talk and jokes. I'm a technical person, so I have a short question. Do we have the data? And I'll give some context to this question. When the pandemics was on, I'm quite certain that the data was measured differently over the different countries. Even there were political impacts with countries trying to justify or not justify their decisions, so they were tweaking more or less results. Different number of people, different proportion of people were being tested in different ways, different regulations inside. So do you think we have, how bad is the problem with the data that you rely on to build, let's say, predictive models?
Yeah. Thanks for the question that I was hoping nobody would ask. Data, no, it's fine. It's a fair question. Yes, data is a problem. I think there are maybe a couple of things to quickly say. I'm just looking at the clock here. I've only got 50 seconds. First, WHO is not an enforcement agency, and this is something that we have to learn how to deal with, right? Member states are sovereign, and they decide how, where, when they collect the data, and what they then release or give to WHO. And so, as part of what we are trying to explore is where can AI help with this? Can we have solutions where we can create algorithms that will help us transform data? But it does come back to people need to be willing to share or expose or give something, right? If we're all going to hold on to our data, we're not going to get very far. And this is why it needs to be a collective effort. It can't just be WHO doing this.
Please give Dr. Abdelmalek, I'm sorry we're out of time for questions. Please give him a round of applause. Thank you so much, sir.